Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's class where we're going to be talking about Introduction to Design Briefs, Information Architecture, and User Flow. Right, so without any other further ado, we're just going to get right into it. Okay. So before we go into today's topic, let's take a good moment to revisit what we talked about last week. And I want you to really stay with me here, especially if you were not, in the class last week, right? Because if you understand last week's lesson properly, today's class will make a lot more sense to you. Okay, product management is more than just about trying to launch features or trying to tick off your checkboxes. You can say it's about, connecting people, decisions, and ideas together to make something that works for users and something that also help aligns with the business's goal. And one of the strongest tools we have to do that is communication, and more specifically, meetings, right? So as product managers, if you understand meetings and learn to run them properly, they become one of your greatest tools, right? Remember, I stated rather that meetings aren't, time wasters, so long as you're a product manager, right? They are more like opportunities, right? Opportunities to align people, to clarify your priorities, to resolve blocks, and to kind of reinforce your product vision, right? That's what we looked at during our last class. And I want us to kind of just walk back through it because, yeah, it sets the foundation for how we even begin to collaborate with different teams, right? We started by asking the question of what makes product management meeting different from just any other work meeting? And the answer was purpose, if you remember clearly. In management meetings, we are, aligning with cross-functional teams around product priorities, decisions, progress, risks, and some roadblocks. We do more than just, sitting down and waiting for updates. We are actively moving the product forward. That's what we do as product managers. And we also broke down the key types of meetings, right, last week. You'll find yourself as a product manager in different types of meetings, right? And we spent time looking at each one of them. We looked at sprint planning, and we said that this is where your user stories become real work. It's when the product team becomes, when the product team comes together rather to decide what will be done in the upcoming sprint. And your role as the PM here is to make sure the priorities are clear and to make sure that the scope is realistic and the user stories are actually ready for discussion. So they have to be ready before you get into any meeting. And we had daily stand-up as well as one of the meetings. Now, daily stand-ups are short, focused syncs, right, where each team member shares what they worked on yesterday, what they are going to be working on today, and if they have any blocker, they get to share that too. Now, in this meeting, you're there as a PM to get insights on the tasks you assigned before now. And we also talked about sprint review slash demo, right? This is where the team showcases what they've built. The key here is not to just try to celebrate that, oh, you've built something, right? Or you've completed a sprint, though that's also important, but it's also a point and a place where you get feedback from stakeholders, from, to validate what's working on your product and, to also spot gaps if there are any, right? gaps in what you have shipped out, what has been delivered. We talked about sprint retrospective. This is internal, we said. It's where the team reflects on what went well and what didn't go well. And you also talk about how to improve, next time. Your role in this retrospective is to create a safe place, like I mentioned, a safe place for people to be able to contribute honestly and support improvement that makes, future sprints even more smoother than the one you guys just concluded, right? And then we mentioned backlog grooming and refinement. I mentioned that this is where we talk about, upcoming backlog items, right? We take them and make sure they are clearly defined and prioritized. This right here, right, isn't something you're doing alone. You bring your dev, your design, maybe not the entire dev team or the entire design team, but you could bring your dev lead and your design lead right into this meeting. It's your job to ensure that everyone understands what's coming up and that each item is refined enough to be picked up in future sprints. And then you have the stakeholders check-ins, right? These are meetings with business teams, executives, or other departments who need visibility into the product or who wants to influence, direction. Your job here is to present clearly and also explain your roadmap or decision and bring feedback into your product thinking. So this is what you do when you're here. So now all these meetings have different goals, but one thing connects them, and that is the role of the PM. In every meeting, you are the voice of the user, right? You are the one who is in charge of everybody being clear on what they're supposed to do. And you're more like the thread that kind of connects, the different teams that you have in your organization, right? If the development team does not understand the why, or your designers, they feel lost, if the business side of things, right, think that things are being delayed, you are the one who brings them all back together. Yes, we also talked about meeting objectives, right? This is key. You can't walk into meetings without a plan. Every meeting must have a goal. If a meeting has no clear objective, it probably shouldn't even happen, right? At all. And if it does happen, it needs to end with clarity. If you started with some sort of confusion or uncertainty, you need to make sure that it ends with clarity of who is doing what and when they are going to be doing it, and what next they are going to be doing after that. That's basically a clarity of the when, how, and the why. And finally, we went through some best practices. We looked at some golden best practices like always send an agenda ahead of time, give people a reason to prepare, start and end on time, right? Um, respect people's schedule, right? Stick to the goal of the meeting. Don't let it drift into unrelated issues. Encourage contribution, manage time. Everyone should feel like they are being heard, but they also need to finish in time for the other person to speak as well. Follow up with notes, right? Notes, decisions, and next steps, right? This is where many PMs kind of drop the ball, if I'm allowed to say that. A meeting is only useful if it leads to action. If after your meeting there is no action point or action items, then that meeting was not very, very useful. If you don't learn how to show up in meetings, the rest of the product management job becomes a goose walk, right? You can have the best roadmap, like I would always say, you have the best vision, even great documentation. But if your team If they're not aligned, if your meetings are sort of confusing or disorganized, the whole thing just breaks down. So going forward, especially in what we're about to cover today, you need to see meetings as a tool, right? Tools to gather insight, tools to drive decision, tools to hand off meaningful work to your design and your engineering team, okay? Please give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me and you can still see my screen. A thumbs up. All right, thank you guys, thank you. Let's continue. And that brings us to today's class, where we'll start exploring how you move from conversations to documentation. Now, as PMs, you're not just the one talking to teams, right? You're the one deciding what those teams get to build. And it all starts with what you hand off to them, right? How you write it, how you describe user needs, and how you structure the product's journey. So we'll be looking into that critical zone between planning and execution, the zone where you create briefs, where you map architecture and chart some flows, right? And just like we used meetings to align people, we'll now use these tools to, align these people's action. Now you use meetings to align your people, but these tools is what you use to align their action. So let us get into it. We're moving from product meetings and internal alignment into something that will, literally shape how the product feels in the hand of users, right? This is the side of product management that involves direct collaboration with designers. I know that not all of you might have design backgrounds. I mean, not all PM does, and that is fine, right? It's perfectly okay. You don't need to become a designer, but you do need to know how to speak designers' language and communicate clearly what needs to be built. When you hear people talk about design briefs, wireframes, user flows, or even information architecture, it may sound like some design jargons, but they are not just for designers. Now, these are the very tools and frameworks we use as product managers to explain our product vision and structure. So before we get deep into each concept, design briefs, information architecture, and so on, we need to understand why this topic is important for you as a PM. Why does a PM need to know about design? Well, because as a PM, your job is not just to write user stories or manage productivity board, right? You are the bridge between the problem and the solution. You represent both the user and the business. You're the one who knows what needs to be built, and you're responsible for making sure everyone around you understands this too. And note that a big part of that everyone is your design team. You could have a team of 15 people, and then you could have like 7 designers. So a big part of everyone are your design team, right? So the reality is that your job as a product manager is not just telling designers, oh, we need a screen that does XYZ. No, that's a lazy way to handle things. That's not leadership either. Your job is to help the design team understand the context, right? The context of why you're building what you're building, who this thing you're building is meant for, right? And what problem you are trying to solve with this product you're trying to build. What constraints, right, do you have? What does or what will success look like at the end of this product? Now, and that's where a design brief comes in. That's where a user flow comes in. That's where information architecture helps you make sense of everything. Let's say you're working on the send money feature, again, from our money transfer app. I hope you remember that. So just saying, telling your designer, design a send money screen is not enough. What do you mean by send money screen? Right? What are the steps the user has to take? Do they need a recipient first? Do they type in an amount? Where does confirmation come in from, right? What happens if there's a failed transaction and many more things? You see how this isn't just about design, right? This is product thinking. This is mapping the experience step by step before you even, get to visuals, right? So, okay, let's zoom out and, talk about what today's class will look like. Well, we are going to start with design briefs, what they are, why they matter, and how you create one that doesn't confuse your design team. We'll learn how to move away from, vague introductions like make it user friendly in quotes, right? And instead, we'll give them a clear understanding of the user, the pain point, the goal, the features, the vision, and so on. And then we'll move to information architecture. This is simply a fancy way of saying how do we organize everything in the product so that it makes sense? Where does each screen that will be designed sit, right? What's the structure and what's the relationship between each page or each screen? You can think of information architecture like a sitemap of a product. And then finally, we'll close, the user flow, which is, the journey a user takes through your product. Okay, we'll talk about how to map that out properly, how to make sure your flows make sense, and how to avoid dead ends or confusing parts. So these are the things that we are going to be talking about today. Before I move into the breakdown of each topic, let me give you a real world picture of why this stuff matters. Let's say you're launching a product, yeah? Your engineering team is ready, your design team is waiting, you've already broken your epics into user stories. But then for some reason, the designers come back to you and ask, can you help us understand what you're really trying to build here? I feel a little lost. Can you just help me explain? At this point, right, if you don't have a solid design brief, if you haven't thought through the structure or the flow, you'll find yourself jumping into execution a little too early. And guess what? You end up building the wrong thing because you couldn't give a correct answer to that question that your designer asked you. Now, this is why a lot of products look good, but then they fail. They fail not because the design was bad, but because the thinking behind the design was uh, shallow. I would use the word shallow, right? It wasn't in depth. And that's your job as a PM to make the thinking in depth, to make it very, right, in depth. Let me say this clearly as well. The success of your product starts before a single screen gets designed by the designers. So when people say we want the app to look modern, or let's make it simple, or we want it to be seamless, and so on. Now, those are just product vibes. What we are doing today is replacing those vibes with actual structures, right? Structure that designers can work with, structure that developers can build from, structure that the Q&A can test against, and structure that your business can, understand and support as well. By business, I mean the people supporting your brand and your business, right? Your stakeholders. Right. So let's summarize again what today is all about. Understanding how product managers communicate with their designer, learn how to break down your product thought into usable design documentation, exploring design briefs, right? What they contain, how you write them, and why they kind of reduce ambiguity, right? Also discovering how information architecture helps you structure the entire experience of your product. We'll also cover learning to build user flows that track what users actually do inside your product. Please note that this is not a UI class. We are not designing. Before you get confused that, oh, are we now doing design? No, this is not a design class. This is not, we're not here to talk about picking colors or choosing buttons and all of that. This is about laying the foundational thinking that guides every design and product decision that follows. When we are done with this lesson, I want you to be able to explain to any designer, right, along the line, during the course of this boot camp, you're going to, you get to a point where you interact with designers and developers. So you might as well just start now, right? When we are done, you should be able to explain to any designer what your product does, what your flow is, and what the user should feel and achieve by the end of it, because that's product management. So keep this framing in your mind as we go forward, because every product that fails users failed in the early stage, and these are the early stages, especially the thinking stage, right? The thinking stage are the early stages. Give me a thumbs up if you can still see my screen. Introduction to design brief, right? Good, thank you. So we'll start first with design briefs, like I mentioned, what they are, what they look like, and how you can start creating one with the same example we've been using, which is the money transfer app. Now let's move to that. So far, we've been talking about the role of the product manager as someone who translates business vision into, actionable buildable pieces, right? You've seen how we take big ideas and we turn them into epics and user stories, and then build a backlog out of them. But here's the thing, those user stories alone aren't enough to design the product. Not by a long shot, they are not. There's a space that exists between your backlog and the design files. And that space is where communication, a clear, structured, and very contextual communication must happen. That particular communication happening is what we call a design brief. A design brief is your way of saying to the design team, this is what we're building, this is who we're building for, and this is why we are doing it. Here's what we need, and here's what or how success will look at the end. And that's it. It's not a novel, right? It's not a series of plentiful or verbose, vague suggestions. It's a simple, clear, and focused document that gives context and direction. That gives you context and direction. Now you might ask, isn't that what the user story already does? Good question. But here's the difference. A user story tells you what the user wants, right? Please follow me. A user story tells you what the user wants. A design brief tells you why, for whom, with what constraints, and towards what outcome, right? That's the difference. Now let's go back to our money transfer example. Your user story might say something like, as a user, I want to add a recipient so that I can send money, right? That's the user story. Now let's imagine what your design brief for that particular feature would include. Now, it will include who the user is, right? Who is the user? Are they new users or are they returning users? Are they tech savvy or they are just, a layman using your product for the first time? Now, what does add recipient involve? It will also answer that. What information do we need to collect? Your design brief will also answer that. What format should be accepted? Example, phone number, bank account, email, and so on. Are there limitations we should we allow international numbers or it's just local numbers? Those are limitations. Are there limitations? What error states should be considered? What does success look like for this feature? What is the priority level of this feature, right? Are there examples from similar apps the team should look at? And many more. Now, you see the difference, right? A design brief paints the full picture, right? And it's your job as PM to write this or to at least collaborate with your designer to co-create this, okay? So now let's answer the question, what exactly goes into a design brief? Please give me a thumbs up if that's the screen you're seeing. What exactly goes into a design brief? All right, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you are following. A good design brief should at least include some of these elements I'm about to mention. And the first one is the problem statement. You always have to start by clearly stating the problem, not the solution first, but the problem first. Let's say in your user research, you discovered that people find it difficult to add a recipient because they're not sure what format to use. Some might be entering names or phone numbers, and others might just be stuck and they are confused, right? When the app shows an error, when they don't get an input content right, they get confused. That's a problem. So your brief might sound something like, or it should sound something like, users are confused about how to properly add a new recipient, leading to increased support tickets and failed transfers, right? We want to solve this by creating a clean, guided recipient adding experience, right? That's basically the problem statement. Now, number two, the objective. Next, you explain what you're hoping to achieve. After stating the problem statement, you get into stating the objective. For example, you can say, create a user-friendly form that allows users to quickly and accurately add a recipient using either phone number or account details while reducing confusion and preventing error. Now, this is helpful. It gives your designer an outcome to aim for, not just a UI task to complete, right? You give them something, they have an aim in mind, right? They know that, okay, at the end of this design, I should be able to reduce the confusion, right? And the error that the users are having. So they have an aim. And now this is very helpful for them. And then we have target users. Who are we designing for? Be specific and sound something like, this is for every everyday user in Nigeria, age range 24 to 40, mostly using mid-range Android devices, and they are familiar with mobile applications, but need clear instructions and minimal effort to complete tasks. right? You can even include the user persona you created here, that if you still have them, which I believe you should, right? This is where your user persona also comes in very, very handy. And then you move over to scope and requirements. This is where you lay out the functional expectations. What exactly needs to be part of this design? Are we going to have form fields? Must form fields be included? Full name, phone number, bank account number, nickname optional, or form must validate inputs before submission. On success, it must show confirmation. On error, it should be able to guide the user to fix the input, right? That is for scope and requirement. And then you have constraints and considerations. Every product has boundaries, technical boundaries, business boundaries, or legal boundaries. This is where you name them. Design should follow the company's mobile UI design system. We're not going to dwell on that because this is not a design class, right? We must support only, now this is you trying to explain in your design brief. Design should follow the company's mobile UI design system, right? And you want to state that we must support only Nigerian phone numbers for now, since we are only targeting Nigerians between the age of 24 to 40, right? Now, design must be usable on screens as small as 5 inches. Now, keep animation light. Performance is the major concern here, not animation, right? This is what your brief should sound like. And then you move over to timeline and urgency. This helps set expectations and priority. This feature is needed for the next sprint, right? Developer handoff expected by Thursday, something like that. Design review session on Wednesday, and so on. So these are like timeline and urgencies. This leads you to your product management meeting, right? It leads you to have a meeting. And then you have success metric. What will tell us that the design worked? Now, you could say something like fewer failed transfers. These are the things that could tell us that, okay, this design has actually worked. We are having fewer failed transfer. We have reduced complaints on recipients adding, right? And then users completing recipients adding flow, right? Is not taking anything more than 15 seconds. That could tell us that, oh, this design iteration actually worked. And then reference or inspiration. Sometimes it's useful to say, take a look at what this other app did, right? Designers call it mood boards, right? They have mood boards where they follow, right? Take a look at what this other app did or what they are doing. Check out Paystacks recipient form, or check out, maybe a popular banking application, right? We want something just as clean, but with our brand personality and all of that. You see how this all comes together, right? Which I hope we are all following. A good design brief answers most of the questions your designer would ask in a kickoff session. Before they even get the chance to ask, your design brief should answer, because it keeps things aligned that way. It saves you time, it reduces friction, and it makes way for your team to come back from designing, and they come back with a design that's actually usable and not something that you're going to end up discarding like 10 or how many screens, right? They can go design and come back with something that is actually usable. Now, let me add something important here. Your brief should not tell designers what to do. Please get me clearly. Your brief should not tell designers how to do their job, right? You shouldn't tell them that. Don't write things like use blue primary button and yellow secondary buttons. No, that is not a design brief. You're not telling them how to do their job. Instead, say something like, or write something like, we need this action to stand out visually, as it is, its most important CTA on the screen. By CTA, I mean call to action. So by telling them that you need this to stand out, they are designers, they'll be able to figure it out. They'll be able to know, oh, are we using the primary color here or are we using the secondary color here? Don't tell them put the avatar on the right, profile on this one. No. Rather, tell them we want to personalize the experience. Consider how we might reflect that visually. Allow them to do, they are the designers, right? Let them do the thinking on their own. Do not put them in a box, right? Let them explore and be creative, right? What you are there to do is to give context to what they are designing. You're not there to tell them how to do their job, right? You're not telling them what colors to use. You're not telling them the feeling or effect you want the interface to convey. That's where partnership comes in. You're giving them needed parts of the business and user understanding, and they bring the visual and UX thinking. When you write a good design brief, you build trust with your design team. They see that, oh, my PM is actually thinking, she has put in some thoughts to this. They know that you're not throwing work at them carelessly and you're not wasting their time. In return, they produce better work faster, right? You also gain the confidence to defend your product vision, right? When stakeholders ask, why did we design it like this? You have a brief, right? You have a brief and a thinking trail, right? You're able to stand your ground and explain to them clearly. And so just a little extra. So note that the design brief is not optional, right? It is not optional. It is not extra. It's not something you skip when you're too busy. It is a core product management tool, right? Especially when you're working with a design team. It reflects your thoughtfulness, it shapes the quality of the product, it brings your team together, right, under a shared understanding of what you guys are building and why you guys are building what you are building. Okay, now that we've dealt with design briefs, how to give designers clear contextual instruction, let's kind of take a step back a bit, because before a designer even starts pushing their pixels or sketching screens, there's something that has to be clear, and that's the structure, right? The skeleton, the arrangement of everything the user might interact with. This is what we call information architecture, or IA for short. Now, starting simply, what is IA? Information architecture is about how you organize content, features, and actions in your product so that the user can find things, move through them, and make decisions without confusion. You can call it a map if you want to, right? If you think of your product as a house, right? Let me use this analogy. If you think of your product as a house, the design is the paint, the furniture, the lighting, the aesthetics, etc. But the information architecture, right, is like the layout, right? You get to see where the kitchen goes, where the hallway connects, what rooms are on what floor if you're building a duplex, right? What door leads where, and so on, many things. You just get to see the layout of how everything links. That's the part, that determines ease of movement and sense of direction. So information architecture is also not a UI design. It's not about buttons or colors, right? It's about structure, right? The structure behind everything. Now, let me give you a clearer picture using our money transfer app again. Imagine you open the app, you see send money, add recipient, transaction history, settings, you see wallet. Now, you tap send money. Please follow me closely. It takes you to a form, right? When you tap on send money, it takes you to a form. You fill the form, right? You tap continue. It takes you to confirmation, then done. And you're back to the dashboard. That flow you just experienced, right? The clarity with which you moved from one place to another, that's the result of a good UI, a good IA rather. And if it's done wrong, you'll feel lost in the product. You'll be like, wait, why is add bank account inside setting and not in wallet? Or why does tapping on the history takes me to profile? A bad IA basically equals confused user, and a confused user equals broken experience and poor reviews for your product. And as a PM, your job is not just to define what the product does, you must collaborate with your designer or designers to ensure that what you've imagined is structured logically for your users. Now, some of you might say, but I'm not a designer. Yes, that's true. But you are the architect of the product experience. You may not be a designer, but you are the architect. That is why it is called information architecture, right? You are responsible for making sure that nothing is random, nothing is misplaced. That is why you are there. IA ensures that the product is navigable and understandable, and it is also logical, right? That is the job of IA. Before we even go into the next part, I want you to fully understand something. If information architecture is the skeleton of a product, then these next parts, right, I'm about to talk about hierarchy, labeling, and so on, right, are like the joints and the bones of that skeleton, which is the information architecture. If they are not sitting well together, if they are not in the right place, your product will feel broken, right? One part of it will feel broken, one part will not look very beautiful. So let's try to take our time here and talk about these joints, right? The first one is hierarchy. Hierarchy in simple terms is the way information is arranged and ranked in your product. It's how things are grouped, what comes first, what supports what depends on what. It's also the structure that tells a user what's important, right? What's secondary and what belongs, somewhere else. But here's the thing. Not everything in your app is equal, right? Some elements are foundational. They are the core, they are the experience, right? Others are supporting pieces. They work in the background or offer some kind of deeper control. When you're building or improving a product, hierarchy is what helps you figure out how to, layer all these parts so that they get to make sense, not just to you and your team, but to your users as well. Looking back at our money transfer app, imagine this. You've opened the app for the first time. What do you do? Or what do you expect to see right away? You probably want a clear view of your balance, right? A button to send money, maybe a list of your recent transactions as well. All of this feels very essential. That's the top level hierarchy. Then you scroll or tap around and you find more, maybe profile, settings, security, options, referral, rewards, and so on. Now, these are just as important as the bigger picture, but they are not the core task, right? So they sit on one level further or one level lower, whichever way, maybe under menu or inside your profile section and so on. Now, that is how hierarchy plays out in real usage. Now, here's where a lot of people get it wrong. They mix up priorities because they are thinking like builders, not like users, right? Just because a feature is hard to build does not mean it needs to be at the top. Just because a stakeholder says something is important doesn't mean it belongs on the home screen. Hierarchy isn't about trying to please your stakeholders. It's about trying to guide your users. Let's say you added a feature that lets people update their PIN. That's very useful, super useful, right? But you wouldn't throw it on the dashboard next to send money. In as much as that is a very useful feature, people updating their PIN, you will not put it up at the dashboard, right, next to where you have send money. Would you do that? Please, let me see a response on the chat. Do you think it's a very good idea to put change password or change PIN next to, you guys use bank application? I think it's useful to put change PIN next to transfer money or send money. I'm looking at the chat. Let's engage, let's engage. Can you guys hear me? Can I still be heard? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, I'm thinking no. Why is it taking us so long to respond now? All right, the answer is no, right? That's a personal setting, okay? That's a personal setting. It should live under accounts or under settings, right? It shouldn't be at your dashboard next to send money button, right? That's what we call a parent-child relationship. Send money is a parent action. Add recipient is its child. Transaction history is part of wallet or account. Change PIN is part of security, which sits under setting. So that makes it the child. It's your job as the product manager to make sure these connections that they make sense, right? And I mean really make sense when you're looking at flows, when you're looking at screens or menus, right? You should be able to keep asking yourself, does this feel like it belongs here? Does this belong here? Right? What's the user's mindset when they land on this page? Are we making them work too hard to find what they need? Because here's the truth, users won't always tell you when something is wrong. They won't always say, oh, hey, this is the wrong place, right? They'll just leave. They'll leave your product quietly with your app or your website. They'll just leave quietly and sometimes very quickly. And when they do, your product becomes very forgettable to them. They might not even come back. They'll look for the next available solution that works better. When users can't find something, they don't assume that maybe they missed it. They don't do that. They assume you don't have it. And that's a very terrible assumption you want to put out for your user because you're going to make them walk away. So as you build out features or work with your team on wireframes or prototypes, I want you to be able to slow down and look at structures before style, right? Look at your structures very well. Ask yourself, what's the high level task here? What needs to be visible right away? Use yourself. When you're doing this, what the best way to practice this is using your own self as a case study, right? When you get into your bank application, what's the highest tax you want to see? What's that one thing that you always want it to be visible, right? What should stay in the background until it's needed? What is related and what doesn't belong together at all? Because when your hierarchy is clear, users build a mental model of your app. They start to trust the layout. They get used to it. They just know that, oh, if I'm using my right thumb, if I just move it up a bit, I get to click on this. If I'm using my left index, if I just move it up a bit, I get to click on it. So their mental I'm getting a network notification. Please give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. All right, thank you. Thank you. So they've been able to register that your product in their minds, right? The mental model of your app is already stored in their mind. They know where to look next. And more importantly, they stop having to think about structure, which kind of frees them to focus on the actual value your product is offering. Because if they can trust that, oh, your structure is accurate and precise, they begin to look at your product differently. They begin to say, oh, so this product does this. Oh, that's very good. They get to see the value you're actually offering, which is the goal, right? That is actually the goal. Great products don't feel like a puzzle. They present themselves as obvious, not as something hidden. And that clarity, that smooth, almost invisible structure is the result of intentional hierarchy. So don't just treat it like a side note. As a PM, this is one of your biggest responsibility. Be the voice that says, let's put this where the user expects it. The users are not in your meetings, they are not with your stakeholders to defend what they want. So it is your place to be able to defend their needs to your stakeholders. And that's how you earn your users' trust, right? One structured screen at a time. That is how you earn their trust. Now, I want you to really sit with this one because in product management, the words you choose can either guide users or confuse them. And when users are confused, your product suffers. Now, labeling. Simply put, labeling is how you name things in your product. All right, this is another component of information architecture. It's the words you use to describe actions, sections, buttons, categories, everything the user interacts with in your product. It's the word you use to describe it is called labeling, right? But I want you to understand this. Labeling is about being clear, right? Labeling is about meeting your user where they are, not where you are, right? Not where your team is, not where sounds cool for your product, right? You're meeting the user where they are. Let me ask you this. If you open a money transfer app and you see a button labeled, please pay attention because you're going to respond to this. You open a money transfer app and you see a button labeled initiate flow, right? Instead of send money. What's your reaction going to be? Now I can permit you to unmute. Let me call somebody. Elizabeth Achom, what's your reaction going to be if you open an app, right? And instead of seeing send money, right, you're seeing initiate flow. What's your reaction going to be like?
Well, I basically would leave the app because if I want to send money, doing that, gives me the prompt on how to spend the money. But if I'm seeing else, then I'm walking away.
Okay, nice. Any other person wants to try? Ijoma, let me hear you.
Okay, so it's actually puzzling because you'll be asking yourself, initiate which flow, right? And if you can't answer it, then you just be frustrated and you leave the app.
Nice, thank you very much. Okay, that's good. So yeah, you probably pause for a second and be like, what's going on here? Okay, somebody said flow. Nice. You pause and ask yourself what is going on here, and you're going to hesitate, right? You might ask yourself, what does this really mean? What does this really do? And that moment of hesitation, that friction, That's what labeling is supposed to prevent in your product, right? Your job as a product manager is to remove friction wherever you can. And labeling is one of the most effective tools to do that. It seems small, it seems simple, right? A word here and there, a phrase, there, but labeling decisions shape your user's experience step by step. You need to be able to label your product very well. Now let's go back to our money transfer example. We're going to be using that a lot. So let's say you've got sections like you've got the home, you've got wallet, you've got transactions, settings, and so on. Now imagine if you labeled wallet as let's say funds hub or cash core. Sounds creative, right? That's very creative if you're doing creative writing. Very creative. Or maybe even clever. But that adds mental stress. It adds mental stress and loads of work to your user. It makes your user think. And that's not what you want, right? A good label should be instantly recognizable. There should be no confusion, no learning curve. They're not coming to you, except even if it's a learning management system, they are not coming there to learn new words. They should be able to relate with your product, right? No internal guessing or, pause. If your user has to pause for like 2 seconds, 1 minute, you've lost them. Send money is better than initiate transfer, right? Add recipients is better than manage beneficiaries. Setting is better than control panel, right? All those words, you want to give them something simple that they can relate with any day, anytime. And look, I know that sometimes stakeholders want you to sound so slick, sound so sweet, and your marketing department might want you to spice things up with creative writings. And sometimes designers will want something fresh. But let me tell you, clarity in a product beats creativity every single time when it comes to labeling, right? It beats creativity every single time because you have different types of people using your product. So you have to label your product very, very well in a way that your users, they are not confused. Now, here's what you need to consider when you're reviewing or writing labels. You need to review, is it familiar to your users? Don't invent new languages for things people already understand, right? I'll say that again. Do not try to invent new languages for things that people already understand. If the rest of the world is calling it transaction history, don't call it activity trail. Just be, just trying to be different. Don't go and call it activity trail, especially if your product is new to the world, right? People are still trying to see if they can trust you, and then you're using all of these foreign words. They're just going to leave you be. Now, you also have to consider, does it match the actions, right? Don't label a button update if the next step is deleting something. If I click on this button, it's going to take me to go and delete something. So why are you labeling it as update? Do you get? Now, don't call it a tab, right? A tab account if it only shows payment history. If you click on that tab and it's going to be showing you payment history, there's no need for you to call it accounts, right? The label should describe exactly what the user will find or what will happen next when the user clicks on that button, right? Is it consistent across the product? That is the next consideration. If you use the word wallet in one place, don't suddenly switch to balance or cash somewhere else. Keep the naming, your naming in uniform. That's how users build confidence. When your labels change, users start, wondering if the functionality has also changed. But maybe your functionality has not changed. It's just maybe one place you're calling it cash, one place you're calling it balance, but then it means the same thing. You're confusing your user. And also, is it simple and short, right? Users don't read, they scan. Take yourself, for example. Is it every platform you go into that you read everything on it? No, you scan through it, right? You don't need 5 words label. Settings is enough. Security is enough, better than manage your login credentials and preferences. That is too long, right? Keep it short, keep it clear, and keep it functional. Is it culturally and contextually appropriate? Especially when you're building for different regions, make sure your labels translate well. If you're working on a product that spans multiple markets, test your label with real users from those markets, right? If you're working on a product that is going to be international, test your product, right, with those international labels, with real users, right? What makes sense to someone in South Africa might confuse someone in where else of Ghana, right? Test your words always. As a product manager, labeling is one of those areas you can afford to ignore. You work with designers who will create mock-ups with placeholder text like lorem ipsum. If you're a designer, you know what I mean, right? Or label, and they'll be like, label goes here, and I want you to jump in. That's your moment, right? Don't let them do that to you. Step in and say, no, let's be specific. Let's use the right words. Now, let's use the right word. Take out that lorem ipsum. Now, another thing, a piece of advice, another thing that will make you stand out as a designer is when you're designing with actual copies, right? When you're designing with actual copies, don't say because, oh, the product manager did not give me content, you go and pack lorem ipsum and put in your design. No, try to, especially your buttons, your CTAs, try to use try to use actual label, right? And look, I'm not saying that, please, guys, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you need to be a copywriter, but you need to care about the words just as much as you care about your design, right? You need to make time to review every screen, every tab, every action, right? Now, as a product manager, you need to sit down with your design team, walk through the flows, read the labels out, and ask yourself, does this make sense? If I come into this application and I'm saying start now or join now, does that make sense more than here we go? Or does that make sense more than active? Stuff like that. You need to sit down this question. Is this word a word that the user would expect? Are we being clear, or we are trying to be clever? Right? You're not trying to make any points to your user, you're trying to build what they want, right? You're trying to build what they want, you're not trying to be clever. The fact that you already have a product out there has already proved that you're clever, right? So now you're trying to be clear for them to, be able to engage with your product. And if it doesn't pass the clarity test, please change it. It's better to change it during the QA/QC state than changing it when your product is already out there. Also, labeling applies beyond just buttons and screens. It also matters in navigation menu, error messages, onboarding steps, and even in notifications. Please, if you cannot understand some of these things I am saying, you can use your Google after now, go through the video again, and just pause in where I'm using words that sounds foreign, and just do a bit of research. It's going to help you to learn better, right? Imagine you get a push notification from your money app that says important account alert. action required immediately. Now, compare what I just said to, we couldn't process your transfer. Please verify your bank details. Which one do you think will fly? Which one will make you open your bank app or your SMS very quickly? Just drop your response on the chat. Which one will make you open your app very quickly? The second one. Thank you very much. Now, the second one is clearer, of course. It's more useful. It tells the user what happened and what to do next. That's what great labeling does. It gives direction, it reduces confusion, and it builds trust between you and your user. Nick has said I don't like stress. Of course, the second one. And trust me, labeling isn't something you set once and forget. As your product grows, you'll need to audit your labels regularly. Make sure they still make sense. Make sure they reflect the current structure. Make sure they still speak your user's language, right? Let me say that again. Speak your user's language, not your designer's language, not your stakeholders, and not your own language, but your own user language. Now, that is how you win. Because in the end, good labeling does two powerful things. It increases user confidence. It reduces mistakes as well. People can't use what they don't understand, and they will not trust a product that constantly makes them feel unsure, right? We have different categories of people who use this product. The people that are schooled and learned, and the people that are not. So if someone who is not very, very vast in knowledge uses your product, and every time you keep making them feel unsure about maybe your choice of words or grammar, they are not going to feel good about always coming to use your product. So good label builds good products. So the next time you're reviewing a design, right, as a product manager, that is, can't hear me. What's going on? Can anyone else hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm saying that the next time that, oh, it's back now. You guys lost me for a sec. Let me just recap what I said. You can still see my screen, right? Please just give me a thumbs up. Can you still see my screen? Okay. All right, thank you guys. So yeah, I said that you need to speak your user's language. Let me just take that again. You need to be able to speak your user's language, not your language, not your stakeholders, and not your designer's language, right? In the end, the two powerful things about good labeling is that it increases user confidence, it reduces mistakes, right? And it helps people to trust your product more, right? Good labels build good products, right? So that is what I said, network notifications. Good, and every good product speaks clearly. So make sure that your product is speaking clearly, because when it speaks clearly, you will know that it is a good product. All right. Now we've done hierarchy, which is all about structure and relationships. We've done labeling, which is about naming things clearly so users don't get lost. So now it's time to talk about navigation systems. This is the actual bridge between the user and the product, right? Navigation is not just a place that shows you things about menus, right? It's also not just a row at the top of the screen or tabs at the bottom, right? Navigation is how your user moves through the product. It's how they get, from one point to another in your product. It's how they know where they are. It's how they also know where they came from and where they are going next. Have you ever opened an app and just feel like you know what to do, right? You just open the app, you know that, oh, from here I'm going here, from here I'm going here. And that's a good navigation at work. But the reverse is also true. When people open a product and feel overwhelmed, they feel lost or stuck, it's almost always a navigation problem. Now let's ground this with our, usual example, the money transfer app. Let's say you log in, you land on the home screen rather. You see your wallet balance. You want to send money. You click send money. You need to add a recipient. So you click add recipient. You want to see your past transfers. So you go to transactions. You want to update your PIN. So you go to settings. Every one of those steps is a navigation moment. And guess what? If at any point the user doesn't know where to go next or how to get back to where they came from, you've frozen your user. They freeze, they get anxious, they get annoyed. And in today's world where we have competitions everywhere, they will leave you within a heartbeat, right? And go find the nearest good product that will take away their pain points. Now, as a product manager, you're not just overseeing what gets built, you're also guarding the user journey. You have to make sure the flow of movement through your product feels very natural, it feels intuitive, and it is consistent. Now, here's how I want you to think about navigation systems. Think about them like, answers to questions. The questions, where am I? Where can I go from here? And how can I go back? That is how you think of a navigation system. So let's talk about types of navigation that you typically see as a product manager. The first one, we have global navigation. This is your main menu, right? It's always present. Think of the bottom tab bar in most apps, right? Home, wallet, transaction, settings. These don't change, right? Screen to screen, they are still there, like, anchors, right? They help user understand the main buckets of your product. Now, global navs should be simple, they should be consistent and limited as well, 4 to 5 item max, right? If your product has more sections, find a way to group them. Don't flood the nav bar with 8 icons. That's not helping anyone. That is very, very confusing, right? Now, the second one, we have local navigation. Now, inside each section, you often have subsections, of course. Now, that is local navigation. So if I'm inside the settings section, I might have tabs like profile info, security, notifications, privacy, and so on. Now, that's local nav. It helps users move within a section, right? The key is to make sure it's clearly styled as a secondary system. So users know where they are, right? And they also know that they are in, a larger structure, not just a concise structure at this point. It's larger because it houses other tabs. Number 3, we have contextual navigation. These are links or buttons, right? Links or buttons that shows up in response to where the user is or what they are doing. For example, if a user is on the add recipient page and you want to let them create a new contact, a button labeled create, right? Create new contact might show up, right? I hope we are following. Now, Contextual nav is very, very dynamic. It appears when it makes sense, but be careful, right? Too much of it and your user starts to feel overwhelmed. Use it sparingly and only when it adds value, right? And then we have what we call breadcrumbs navigation. This is more common in complex web apps or platforms, worth knowing, right? Breadcrumbs show the path the user has taken, like home, transaction, failed transfer, retry, etc. This helps users, orient themselves, especially in systems with many deep layers. They are able to know that, okay, this is how I got here, this is how I got here, and so on. So that is why it's called breadcrumbs, everywhere that you have left your imprint, right? Then search as navigation. Sometimes search is the navigation. In large products, think about banking apps, right? With tons of features, users might not want to click around. They just want to type. Maybe they are looking for their statements, so they just want to go and type statements or card limit and go straight to the point. Now, if your product has a lot of content, the search bar isn't optional, right? It's a navigation necessity. Now, let me pause here and tell you that bad navigation kills good products. You can have the best features in the world, but if your users can't find them or they can't get back to them, maybe I saw the search bar at some point and then I used it and now I want to use it again, I can't get back to it. That is very bad. Navigation is what ties everything together. You might even see it in feedback, like I couldn't find where to update my number. Imagine somebody coming to your feedback session to give you that feedback. I got stopped trying to send money. That's not a good one. I had to close the app and start over. That is very bad. Now, that is navigation failing your users. So what should you be looking out for when designing or reviewing navigation? Ask yourself, is the main navigation always visible? If users have to scroll to find your nav, that's a problem. The main navigation should always be visible. And you should also ask yourself, is it consistent across the products? Don't move nav's item around. Users build muscle memory. When they have built muscle memory with your product, do not confuse them, right? Don't move your nav items around. You should also ask, do labels match the destination? We've talked about this already during labels. If I click on security, I better not land on a screen that only shows password field with no explanation. That's not good. Is there a clear way to go back? Back buttons are very essential as well. Don't hide them or assume everyone knows how to swipe. You always have to show your back button. Now, this is not a design class, so I'm not going to dwell on a lot of things. Another question will be, are you hiding too much behind icons? Not everyone understands what a hamburger icon is. Label your buttons unless users are extremely savvy and you do not have control about the kinds of users you're going to have on your platform. So please make sure that you label your button. Don't say, oh, I've used an icon. Everybody knows what a card's icon signifies, or everybody knows what a home icon signifies. That's a very, very wrong assumption. And remember, navigation decisions are not just the designer's job. You, as a product manager, need to be in those decision conversations, right? You need to raise your hand and say, hey, if a user lands here, how do they know where to go next? Or why is the wallet section under 3 clicks? Can't we move it up? Questions like that, you have to think like the user always, because we are user-centric, right? Because here's the truth, navigation is trust. I've said this before. If I always know how to get around your product, I start to trust it. If I always know where to find things, I begin to feel empowered, with your product. If I never get stuck, right? Maybe when I'm trying to use your product, I don't get stuck. I'll keep using it. And that trust, right? That trust is what keeps your users coming back. It keeps them coming back. And if you get that right, your product stops feeling like a maze for a lot of other users and starts feeling like, their everyday go-to product. And that is basically what you want for your product. That is what you want for your product. Now, not every user is going to patiently click through your app to find what they need, right? Like I said, some users just want to type. Some users just want to go straight, to it. And that's where your search system becomes a needed functionality. Now, think of search as a shortcut, a user-initiated shortcut that, saves them time, reduces frustration, and gives them power. Let's use our usual example, the money transfer app. Let's say you have a feature that lets people download their statements, right, from the last 6 months. But instead of putting that upfront, maybe you buried it under your home or under your transaction filters, or maybe even your export options that houses the download statement. Imagine the frustration when a user wants to find their statement quickly and they cannot remember where it is, right? Because you have buried it under a lot of, tabs. Imagine the frustration, right? When they want to find it and they cannot find it quickly, they cannot remember. That's why many users will just go straight to search and type. They'll probably go to the search and type download statements or export transaction. Now, if your search is properly set up, it should take them directly to that screen, or at least give them the top relevant options, right? That's the value of search. But here's where it gets somewhat tricky. Search doesn't automatically work just because you put a search bar there. No, it doesn't. It needs to be designed, it needs to be tested and refined like every other feature that you have in your product. So let's break it down. There are two major parts to a search system in any product. The first one is this, the search input, right? What the user types, that is what the search input is. And the second one is the search output, what the system returns to the user after they have typed. Please give me a thumbs up, let me know you're still hearing me. Okay, thank you guys. Now let's start with the input side. You see, the way users think about your product is not always how you've labeled it. That's why your search input has to be flexible. Let's say you called the feature export history, but your user types download statement. If your search engine only matches exact words, please take note of this. If your search engine only matches exact words, that's a fail. The user typed in the right intent, but your system didn't understand it. This is why things like keyword mapping and synonyms matters in product design. That is for designers, and we're not talking about design. Now, the search input must also handle typos, that's spelling typos, right? It must handle variants like transfer money versus send money. It must be able to cater for that. It must also handle suggestions, as you type, it kind of auto-completes it for the user. And if applicable, it could also handle voice input, right? It could also handle voice input. All of that increases the chances the user gets what they need and they get it fast, right? You don't want to reduce a user's chances, you want to increase it. Now let's talk about the output side, which is just as important. Imagine you type transfer in the app search bar. What happens next? Does it show a shortcut button to the send money screen or a list of your past transfers? Remember, you typed what? Transfer. Or does it show a list of your past transfer? Does it show you help articles on how transfers work? A link to added recipients or something else? All of this might be relevant, but they need to be ranked and grouped properly. And more than that, the search results should be clear and actionable. If a result takes me to a dead end or a vague screen, you've just wasted the user's time, right? Your search query should take the user to the appropriate place that the user wants to be. So here is what good search output does. A good search output ranks results based on relevance, right? It groups results by types, features, transactions, help, etc. And then it labels each result clearly so the user knows what to expect. It also allows filtering. Example, it allows you to filter between recent transfers only or transfers you've carried out this week or last month or last year, right? And most importantly, right, it gets users to the right place with one tab, right? Now let's connect it to information architecture as a whole. Search doesn't replace good hierarchy or navigation. No, it doesn't. It only complements them. In fact, a good search system relies on a well-organized product. If your features are randomly placed, if your labels are confusing, if your hierarchy is somewhat messy, then your search system won't know what to fetch. Or worse, it will fetch the wrong thing for your user. So, as a product manager, your job isn't to just say, let's add a search bar. Your job is to ask questions as a product. Don't get tired of asking questions as a PM, right? You need to ask questions. What are the top things users search for? How do users describe those things? What are the layman words that they use? Are labels matching users' vocabulary? Are we tagging or indexing items properly? Right? Our results, are they ranked, to reduce friction or to increase friction? Because if you don't ask those questions, search becomes a trap for your user instead of being a tool to help them. Now, let me give you a quick example. Say your app has bill payment, airtime top-up, data purchase. You may have, let's say you may have labeled, these things separately because of how your internal system works. But users might just search for pay bills and expect all of those things I just listed to show up. That means you need to tag airtime and data as billable, right? You need to tag them as things that are billable services too. Otherwise, they won't show up in that search result, and your user will think that the feature does not exist. That's what we call semantic search, but we are not going into that. Semantic search is making sure that, the search understands meanings, not just exact words. Now, don't worry, I'm not saying you need to become a search engineer. No, that's not why we are here. But as product manager, you need to understand how users use search and guide your team to be able to set it up properly. You have to guide your team to set it up properly. So let's summarize what a strong search system should do. A strong search system should help the user locate any content or feature fast, should accept various forms of input words, phrases, typos, voice, etc. It should match against synonyms and related terms, return results that are relevant, clear, and actionable, show suggestions to reduce effort, complement not replace the rest of your product structure. It should complement, not replace. Because at the end of the day, here's the goal. The user should never feel stuck. If they know what they want, they should be able to get to it instantly, either by clicking or by searching. That's the power of search. That's what makes your product feel smart. And that's the fourth pillar of a strong information architecture. So guys, I have said a lot. And as a result, we are going to pause here for today. In the next class, we are going to pull everything together: hierarchy, levels, navigation, search, and then we are going to explore how to map a user journey. We do not have enough time to do that today, user journey. So in our next class, we'll talk about user journey. So if I were you, I'll be here and I'll be on time because I am excited about it already. So that's the end of this session. Well done for staying to the end, guys. And I'm going to take 2 questions or so before we call it a wrap. So do we have any questions? I'll just stop sharing now. Do we have any question? Okay, Elizabeth, go ahead. Can you hear me, right?
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay, so just a quick one. Okay, prior to this time, when I did UI UX still with KodeCamp, right? For our capstone project, the designers had to do the information architecture. All right, so I want to know, as a PM, right? If I'm working with a team and I have designers and I have programmers, do I have to do the information architecture, or does the designer still have to do the information architecture with me as the PM going through it and making the necessary corrections? Thank you.
Okay, that's a very beautiful question. So the right way, we talked about hierarchy, the right way to do it, right? It's for you as the PM to present your designers with a design brief alongside the information architecture, right? But then it also helps if you've not done that, but you have the design brief. It also helps not just you, but the designers as well, to maybe get into a meeting, and then you get to build the IA together. It will help them understand the flow. But then you, as the PM, you have to take the lead, because you need to be able to understand the product enough to be able to structure it for your designers. So primarily, the information architecture is done by the PM. But if you have your hands full and then you have, you have people that can do it with, of course, you guys can do it together. I don't know if that answered your question. Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, I'll take one more. Any other question? All right. Let me stop the recording so we can talk about some other things.